As we get into these final weeks of the election cycle, a new CBS News Battleground Tracker shows Joe Biden leading in two states that went to President Trump in 2016. Biden is ahead of the president in Arizona by 3 points. The state has voted Republican in almost every presidential election since 1952. The lone exception was Bill Clinton's win in 1996. And in the battleground state of Wisconsin, Joe Biden holds a 5-point lead. President Trump held a rally there Saturday, just a day after the state reported its highest number of new coronavirus cases. For more on all of this, let's bring in CBS News Elections and Surveys Director, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, always so nice to see you. So let's start with Arizona. Why is President Trump trailing there?
How you doing, Lana? Well, if you look at Arizona, one of the things in context is on the electoral map, it's one of these states in the Sun Belt that is a toss-up, which, as you noted at the top, was not really in play in 2016. This is a new part of the battleground, and it's important because it's got a comparable number of electoral votes to some of the states in the upper Midwest. Well, one reason is the COVID outbreak. We have seen in our polling there now and even back into the summer when the state was really hard hit, voters there saying that they didn't like the way the Trump administration was handling the outbreak. So if I'm going to dive in here for a minute and I'm going to show you, let me scroll to this, let me show you this, which is who would handle the outbreak better. Well, in Arizona, you see that Joe Biden is ahead of Donald Trump on perceptions of that. So that's one reason. The other one, Lana, and this I think is really interesting, seniors are really important as a voting bloc in Arizona, probably more than a quarter of the electorate there. Well, among seniors, we asked, have the policies of the Trump administration towards the COVID outbreak made seniors safer or less safe from the effects of the virus? And you see a bulk of them say that they feel like they've been made more at risk. Well, the second beat on that is that almost all of these seniors who feel they've been made more at risk tell us they're voting for Joe Biden. So that's how that concern translates into vote choices, Lana.
Very interesting. Also particularly interesting given the Senate race that's taking place there. All right, let's turn our attention to Wisconsin then, Anthony. President Trump won the state by a narrow margin in 2016. I remember that was a big headline back then. So what's happening in Wisconsin this time around?
It was, and it was a very narrow victory, but one of the things that happened was Donald Trump had very strong support among a key part of his base, which is white non-college voters in that state. His margins among that group are down now. So let me show you, I'm going to dive into Wisconsin here, leaning towards Joe Biden. So you see that 5-point lead. But the way to emphasize this is to show how the white non-college vote can swing the state. At the moment, 52% Republican towards Donald Trump, okay? If he were to win higher percentages of it, I'm going to move that number and you're going to watch the state numbers swing accordingly. He goes ahead of Joe Biden if he could get up to, say, 57% as opposed to 52. That's what the size of that block does, and that's what approaching his 2016 large numbers would do for him. Why is it down now from 2016? One reason is that these voters tell us that they don't feel that the president is as concerned with the middle class as he is with the wealthy and the elite in this poll, and that's obviously been one of the president's calling cards towards that voting bloc. So if he's trailing a little bit or down a little bit on that measure, it helps explain one reason why, Lana.
And we've certainly seen the Biden campaign try to take advantage of that. All right, a record number of voters are casting their ballots by mail in this election, Anthony. We don't know who they're voting for, obviously, but I understand you are able to parse out some information. So what are you learning?
Well, we ask them. And they tell us. And so what happens is, as all these millions of votes, it's pretty straightforward, I suppose, but the case is that when people vote early and then we do a poll, we can ask them who they voted for. And what we see is that just as they told us before the early voting started, before the mail balloting process started, Democrats saying that they were A, concerned about the coronavirus, and B, more likely to vote by mail. And in at least a couple of these states, we are seeing, in fact, that people who say they've already turned in that ballot say they voted for Joe Biden. And I've got a couple of graphics on that, too, which I'll show you. So what you get is, in all of these states, one of the things that is really important is you've got these early votes that are going to come in now. And then on election day, you're going to get the in-person voters. And I think a big question as we head towards election night, Lana, is going to be, okay, we know Democrats voted early by mail. We'll know about the size of the early vote because the secretaries of state report how many ballots that is. Haven't counted them yet, but they report how many that is. And then we're going to be able to say, okay, if the Democrats do have a lead on that, here's how many votes that the Republicans and the president need to go over the top on election day. And I think that's going to be a big number we're watching. This graphic just illustrates what we've seen already, back to my earlier point, which is that people who say they've already cast their ballots say they voted for Joe Biden. Having said all that, Lana, this is just the early part of the early vote. We've still got weeks of that early vote coming in, so we'll update everybody.
I know. I like that you and I continue to try and seed to America the idea that there's still a lot that we're all going to be figuring out on election night and possibly even in the days following. All right, one last question for you, Anthony.
Yes.
On top of early voting, we've also spoken a lot about how many people have already made up their minds. So in the final stretch, how are these last undecided voters responding to each campaign's closing arguments? And is the tone of the two campaigns having any effect on voters?
Well, you're exactly right that so many voters tell us they've made up their mind, have long since made up their mind. Obviously, the people who are voting early have already made up their mind. Let me show you this. We asked the question of, what would you like the next 4 years in politics in the U.S. to be? And among the words that people picked, some of them were calm and exciting, okay? Well, the people who said they wanted it to be exciting are marginally for the president. This is in Arizona, but we asked in Wisconsin too. And the people who said they wanted it to be calm, Joe Biden had a big lead among them. One thing that may be an advantage for Joe Biden, at least on this metric, is that more people said they wanted it to be calm. So that may accrue to his advantage. But it's one of those ways you try to get the affective way that people approach the tone of the campaign and what they're overall looking for on that kind of a measure, Lana.
I imagine the team had fun asking that question, getting those responses as well. All right, Anthony Salvanto, look forward to talking elections with you in the last couple of days and then on election night itself. Thank you.
Sounds good.